Welcome in to episode 009, Fatal to Prejudice. I got my buddy Nathan here. He's a physician at a hospital here in Columbus, and I'm pretty excited to have him in. I think he's got some cool hot takes on everything, and his life's pretty interesting. So excited to share this here today with him. So thank you for coming in, Nathan.
Hey, pleasure to be here.
Yeah. So let's start off where you grew up. You grew up in Milwaukee area, not originally from Columbus.
No, not originally from Columbus. Milwaukee, Wisconsin, like north suburbs of Milwaukee. It's a town called Bayside. They call themselves a village, the village of Bayside. Population. The sign was right next to our house too, so it was like population 3,283. And I remember always riding my bike past it without a helmet on because, 1988 or whatever, and seeing the sign and being like, don't kids get born? Right? Like, why? It can't be 3,283 still. Like, don't people die? But it stayed that way for years in the village. It's a suburb of Milwaukee, yeah.
So, like, how far from Milwaukee is it?
Well, good question. I can tell you that downtown Milwaukee, like lakefront Milwaukee, that's where the mall was that had the best baseball cards, right? And so we were able to figure out how far it was. And I will tell you that my brother and I growing up, there wasn't anything that would really keep us from getting the best baseball cards. This is like the 3-level rack packs where one of those cards is probably worth like $8. I was like, and it was only at Grand Avenue Mall in downtown Milwaukee, which I think my mom said still exists, and I can't verify that. But it doesn't matter if it's January in Wisconsin and 5 degrees. If we had $5, we were going to go get a rack pack. And how are we going to get it? We're going to ride our bikes there. So how far is it? This is why I think we were crazy. My brother and I were probably like, he's older, so he's 2.5 years older, so maybe 11 and 8. And we would ride probably 15 miles to Grand Avenue. Remember, no phones, right? 10-degree weather. We put on these big, thick mittens. And because we wanted those rack packs, and they were probably like 79 cents cheaper than they were anywhere else we could get, so we had to ride all the way to Grand Avenue, the card store at Grand Avenue, to buy them. So that was probably 15 miles into town, into like the city of Milwaukee.
Wow. And you rode your bikes there like in the 80s, 5 degrees. How many feet of snow on the ground?
Yeah. When they plowed it, we were glad. Yeah, we did a lot of that. Like my mom was like, "Don't cross busy streets," and we were like, "Okay, cool." Like, there we go. Yeah. We also, we grew up in like a macrobiotic vegan house before those words were words, but there was no dairy and there was no meat in the house.
Interesting.
And there was no sugar either. We had like raisins. And so, again, you have like $1.79, and you could go to the closest place to get a donut for that. Or you could get on your bike in 5-degree weather on really, really busy streets with no sidewalks and ride 5 miles and get a box of donuts. So that's what we did.
You kind of got into it, but like, what was that like just growing up? No meat, no dairy, no sugar. Do you remember growing up that way? Did you ever just crave like meat and dairy? Obviously you crave sugar with the donuts, but
yeah, you want what you can't have, right?
Right.
But it's true. I mean, but your environment is your environment. So, people talk about folks that grow up in certain situations or deprived environments or whatever it is. And, did you ever want? And it's like, I didn't know what to want, especially when I was young. There's stories from the neighbors. Like I still, we were kind of a tight neighborhood of 5 houses. Like we had picnics together in the summer, just the 5 houses. And there's, they tell this story about my first tuna sandwich. It was probably like, 18 months old. It was some kid's birthday party, and they put it down in front of me, and apparently I just shoveled it in my mouth and destroyed it. But that same house, you know Carl Buddig, like the Buddig meats, like the thinly sliced lunch meat of the lowest quality possible.
I don't know the company, but I probably know the flavor.
Conceptually, like small bags of it because they can like have a little bit lower of a sticker price or whatever. Another story I've been told apparently is that we got budding one day, like white bread with budding on it, and came back to the house from across the street. Mom, we got budding. And that was like a really big deal to have the cheapest, dirtiest meat in the world because it was meat and it was something else and probably just coated in sugar. And I know I can only imagine what my parents thought.
Yeah, so like what else happened growing up in Milwaukee area?
I mean, you got to think it's like it's suburban. It's like suburban living growing up, and the stories that a lot of folks have to tell about the burbs. I mean, we certainly, I'm thankful, and I think about this a lot about how you grow up and how it builds humility.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So you grow up and did I want meat? That's sure fine. I did. Right. Did I eat well? Yes. There was always food and there was always opportunity and the house was always warm and we didn't have to think about that. And we had like woods in the backyard and sledding hills and in the yard in the burbs. And we could trust our neighbors and just walk in their house or knock on the door. And we didn't know the difference between a safe neighborhood and an unsafe neighborhood. We just knew you could do whatever you wanted, basically. And as a dad now, it's like something that I always want to think about in terms of instilling humility in my kids is that there are humans that don't live like you're growing up. My kids are growing up in the north suburbs of Columbus when their father grew up in the north suburbs of Milwaukee. It's one Midwestern town to another in a very similar situation. And it's like, I hope that you will learn what I feel like I know, that sense of safety in your own home is a luxury.
Absolutely. It is interesting hearing or seeing kids grow up these days and they have the luxury of safety that, I guess we had growing up, but we see it, right? And they don't. And it's cool being on like the other side, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And then you live in a bubble and you don't have to, but we chose to. And this is more like fast forward to the present, but it's like there's this vignette from the north suburbs that was like the classic thing for this, that we have some friends, great people, great family, 3 boys in the family, and they drove to somewhere in Columbus where there was a variety of cars as opposed to just a bunch of SUVs and Teslas, right? That's where they drove to, and there was a car with, the mom looked over at this one car that was not in that category and asked the kids, "Hey, do you know what those orange spots are? These circular orange spots on the car?" And they're like, "Those are bullet holes," right. because they had never seen rust on an automobile.
Wow.
Right, like that. And yeah. So clearly that's like a lesson for me where it's like, kids, get in the car, let's go see some stuff, right? But yeah, I think I grew up in a similar fashion.
Yeah.
Right. And it bears some conversation and some thought and ideally some humility about how you raise your own kids and how you make sure that you make an effort to understand people when you encounter them that don't live like that.
Right. It's always interesting seeing the other side of things, that, other people's experiences growing up are not the same as yours. And it's always a cool experience listening to what they have to say and how they grew up. But I mean, living in, up there in the northern part of Wisconsin, I guess it gets pretty snowy up there. Were you like one of those people that hated it? Did you love it? Tell me about it.
Oh yeah. All right. Well, there's no mountains, right? So
right.
So this is like a separate podcast and conversation where you and I walk and just talk about snowboarding for like 5 hours. But but that wasn't it, right? Not in Milwaukee. There was no, you can't. I mean, the ski hills outside of Milwaukee were garbage piles.
Yeah.
And so yeah, they just put lights on them at night. like
Wow.
right next to the burbs too. Like the backyard of one of our family friends was the ski hill, and it was a garbage pile that just got really big, and then they covered it with dirt, and then they put grass on it, and then they put lights on it, and that's where people skied. And so yeah, we can't get into snowboarding, but snow was like the quintessential 4 months of our life, like back when it snowed a lot, and it was huge. I love it. You know, people are complaining about winter, and it's winter now. I mean,
Sort of.
yeah. Well, it's not. I was told the
Technically, it's
21st. Yeah,
winter.
yeah. So it's like, you know, in podcast world, it's like it's whatever you're experiencing when you're listening to this, right?
Right.
But it's we're close to Christmas, and so it's winterish, and so yeah, it was already, you know, feet of snow on the ground when I was a kid around this time, and you know, I'm dreaming of a white Christmas. Well, yeah, you're gonna get one, right? And I was nuts. I was the youngest of three within our household. My oldest sister is a half sister, but there was never anything like not sister about her. She still is. Nicole's
Yeah.
my sister, right? And Andrew's my brother, and they'd be out playing in the snow, and my mom tells this story. I think it identifies me as a human really well, and still is this way with my snowboarding life, which is like I was probably 18 months, 2 years young, right? Walking, but young. And my brother was then probably 4.5 or 5 or 4. And Nicole would have been kindergarten age. And they were out playing in the snow, and it was time for me to go to bed. And I don't like going to bed. I still don't, right? Like there's stuff to do. There's books to read. There's something. And they were out playing in the snow, and our driveway was such that the garage was on the side. So if the plow would push the snow off, it would push it to the end of the driveway in this big pile. And the end of the driveway below it, there was a hill. So we're talking like high speed for kids. You know, you climb on top of that hill, you get on the sled, and you can fly, right? And you could pretty much fly until you hit all the trees, which was it was pretty far for us as kids. And so my mom's like, hey, you gotta go to bed, right? And my two siblings are out there sledding because they're older. And I was not having it, throwing a fit, you know? And so my mom, being my mom, my dear mother, said, you know, experiential learning, like that's the way to learn, right? So I was like probably in a diaper and a shirt or whatever. And she said, all right, go outside. Bare feet, right? Nothing on my legs. Get out there, go outside. This is as she tells it to me. You don't really make memories at that age, but this is the story as told. Mom, you'll have to verify this as you listen and see if it's true. At least that's how I remember it, you telling me. So apparently the story goes that I go outside, and she assumed that I'd be back in screaming at her about how cold it is 3 to 5 minutes later because I'm barefoot in the snow. But apparently I stayed out there for an hour and just kept sledding. Just kept going and kept going. And that's still true. I mean, that's still, my wife will say, you know, she's a snowboarder, and my wife will say, you know, that once I get on the chair and I start going, I'm not stopping till they don't run the chairs anymore. Beyond the point of rational, right?
Right.
Where she's like, I'm done for the day, and I'm like, I love you dearly. Can I take like 5 more runs? Like, do you see the chair moving? Do you see the snow falling? Do you see the powder on the ground? I need to be there.
You're very much immersed into the experience that you're having right at that moment.
Yeah, in the moment, because the chairs will eventually stop running, and then all we can do is like sit and eat chili and go to sleep so we can snowboard the next day.
So yes, you're very much a winter person. I love it.
Yeah.
I'm similar. I'm similar in that fact. I love the cold. Let's have a 90-degree day, 120% humidity. I hate that. It's the worst.
Yeah, like a beach.
Beach, it depends on the beach, but usually it sucks.
Yeah, right. Like, what are you guys doing on the beach?
Sitting.
Yeah. How's your book? What are
Sorry,
you on the beach?
You just get all hot, sweaty. It's usually not cloudy. I hate it.
Yeah, right. There's like the sunburn. I mean, we can agree about this, and that you know, another step into humanity where it's like, if the beach does it for you, that's awesome. I'm not going to understand it.
Yep.
Right.
Exactly.
And I have family members that you can see it in their eyes. This is my wife's brother's wife. She loves it, every second of it, and she will spend 8 hours there. And that's awesome. And I think that's actually a really good life feeling to have, to say, I haven't found a way yet to enjoy the beach. Like, I haven't found a way. But it's really important, I think, to take a step back and say, that gets them going, and that's awesome. So it's not, you don't want to be critical of beach people, but more so to say, I haven't figured that out yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. A little bit about me. I grew up with my parents grandparents, living close to the beach in Florida.
Okay.
And so that's like all I knew when I would vacation. I never got to go out to the mountains or visit any cool places like that. So growing up, I was a beach person, and then I discovered the fun higher altitudes in the winters and all that, and I was like, this beach stuff is not for me anymore.
Yeah, but there's even when we talk about this, and just knowing you as a person too, I could see us both sort of digging into it and being like, if it can work for them, I bet you we could try to figure it out.
Yeah, I can sit here and analyze how I can enjoy it.
Oh yeah, like analysis paralysis. Like get that far into being like, all right, I'm gonna have to be on the beach for 4 days, and I'm gonna figure out a way. I mean, hey, I grew up. It's not the same hot beach, but I grew up on Lake Michigan.
Yeah,
there's sand right there. There's waves. People surf right there, right? And that's like. It was on the bike. This was when the weather was nicer, so it was just no problem. On the bike, it was a mile. And we almost never got down to the water, maybe like twice a summer. We just didn't do it. We just found other things to do.
Wow. Interesting. What were the other things that you guys did?
I mean, I think like the things you do, like, You go to the playground and play Floor is Lava with like...
Oh, that was one of my favorite games as a kid.
Right, like it was the gravel is lava, and the playground was probably like 6 blocks away, this park. Ellsworth Park is the park. And the guy who lived next to Ellsworth Park was a guy named David Ellis, and he actually showed up at that park a few times. David and I ended up going to school together. Eventually, because I went from a public school to the private school, and he and I went to school together. And David would sometimes pop by the park, I remember, and I knew him because he was at the park, and we ended up switching. I ended up switching into his school eventually, and so we'd play Floor is Lava at that park, and we'd make sure you don't touch the gravel, and I could draw you. As long as the playground is the same way from 35 years ago. Oh, and there's no way it is, right? I could draw you all the items of this playground and all the sneaky ways you could get around it. But I think that's the side, the tangent of this conversation is that you can never guess. I mean, you find people in life and then you find them again. And so David and I are 15 days apart in age. And we weren't exactly tight growing up, but we saw a lot of each other. And I will tell you, I had one of the more inspiring meals. I had breakfast with him in Las Vegas like a month ago. Like we were both seeing fish, like the rock band Fish there, and like. Oh,
so this was planned.
Yeah, well, I mean, it wasn't. It was kind of like social media. You kind of know who's there, and you know who's at the concert, and you know who's not, and that I like woke up early one morning and texted him. I'm like, "Yo, what are you doing?" This is it's a guy I've known for 35 years, 30 years, something like that. And he's like, I'm sitting wide awake at 6 a.m. just like you, right? Why are we awake? We don't know. And we had breakfast, and he just had so much to share with me. And this is a guy that was like, Ellsworth Park, this playground, right?
Yeah.
That what wanted to do in that conversation was to stop, like to say nothing, right? Like, I mean, basically the role you're playing right now, which is like, just see how much content you can get.
Yeah.
Right. I don't want to dumb down what you're doing, man. Sorry. So, but that's what I was doing. I mean, we're sitting there at some Vegas breakfast joint, right? And he's lived a really cool life, right? And on top of cool, also has overcome a lot of things. And I don't even know how long we sat there. Longer than they would have served us food. It was like we took an hour to order, and we just kept talking, right? But the underpinning here, that like the big feel I had in that conversation was all about how the if you're going to get the most out of something, or if you feel even the person you're with is going to get the most out of it, you got to step back and just listen and accept silence, because that's when somebody has a chance to brew a thought and then give you something big. And my wife sleeps in really well, and so she was with me in Vegas, and I went back to the room, and she's like, "Where you been?" And I was like, "Hanging out with David Ellis." She's like, "What?" And I'm like, I almost have like, I want to tell you 20 things about all the things we talked about. And she's actually the one that 13 years of marriage in, was the one that really taught me that if you're going to really have a meaningful discourse with somebody, you're going to listen more than you talk.
Absolutely. You gotta really take in what they're saying. So I think that's awesome that you were able to connect with an old friend and really just sit down and listen to whatever he had to say.
Yeah. And again, I think it'll always come down to humanity. Like there's there's cool nuts and bolts things I learned about, like we were talking about like investing and how people do their business things and family and all these things, but he has this grasp on what makes humans tick.
Yeah.
And he left me with book recommendations. That's one thing. Like when someone inspires you, I feel like that's the moment where you ask them, like, what have you been reading? Right. And who knows if that's what gets them there.
Yeah.
Right. But it's like, hey, give me a bibliography, man, and I'll go home and read those. And he did, and I didn't have to ask. He had them for me. He's like, I got these books for you. And so that's been since I saw him that day, it's been my reading of these books to read. These are the things you should read.
So I have to ask you, last week you were talking about a psychology book you were reading.
Yeah.
When we were hanging out. Is this one of the books?
Oh, Cameron, this is perfect. Yeah. This is one of them.
I really want to read this book. I was actually going to text you like 2 days ago.
I should have brought it.
I forgot.
Yeah.
I forgot to ask you, so it's fine.
Yeah. I should have brought it. Yeah, but another thing here about books is that when you finish with a book, you're not going to read it again. Right. That's my style. I'm not going to read it again. So find someone to give it to. Right. Okay. You could hold on to it and look at it, but I should have brought it to you. And it's, I think I promised it to another mutual friend of ours.
That's fine.
Yeah. I'm going to put his name on here, so I have to give it to him.
Okay.
It's Eric. It's our friend Eric.
Okay.
Yeah.
I will happily purchase this book because I'm very interested, but can you give us like a top level of what it's about? Just because we're talking about it, I just want you to say a little bit about it.
It's a negotiation book.
Ooh, interesting.
Yeah. And it's as long as that's the one we were talking about. And the title, I'm trying to figure out that I can like paraphrase the title, but I was like, open it, read it quick kind of thing.
Yeah.
Never meet in the middle or something like that. Never meet halfway or.
Yeah, I think I've heard of this book before. You're paraphrasing it correctly. I don't remember the exact title.
It's like the one where it's like, if getting to yes. There's that book, if getting to yes just doesn't make you feel right, maybe this is the one you should read. And the author like takes getting to yes and just throws it under the bus, where it's like it's not the way to go. And the reason why he recommended it was not because, I mean, I'm a physician, so like it's not negotiation as a physician. And actually in 2021, 2022 medicine, my feeling about it is that it's far from negotiation. It's more so, it's all about letting people know what choices they have and empowering people to access the healthcare system and access their own bodies. Again, comes back to listening, right? where it's like, I think a patient can basically tell you everything they want if you listen to them. And then the whole concept of, quote, medical decision making, unquote, which is a phrase in medicine where it's like, actually, you can't make it on your own. If like the physician makes the decision, and it's like, nah, like, I don't think so. The physician makes the recommendation because the patient has to follow through.
Right.
And so it's not like I do any negotiating ever, but the whole thing is that you do it on a daily basis. Where it's like, kids, time to come upstairs and eat lunch, and the kids are like, no, we're not doing this, and it's like you end up getting into negotiations of like, well, maybe you'll lose this opportunity to have 5 gummy bears or whatever the battle you have with your children or your spouse or with all the little battles you have. It gets into the psychology of what humans want when you do that, and that's why we were talking about family. When he recommended the book.
Okay. How did that, do you remember how this all came about or no?
I still remember the mediocre bowl of oatmeal. Yeah.
I'm just so interested on how family, the topic of family and discussing that came to this book recommendation.
No, David, you're going to be listening to this, so you might have to correct me later if I get this wrong, because it was like a pleasantly circuitous conversation, I would say. Like, we came back to stuff, and so there were little points we got to. There was some more like professional type talk, but there was also things about like time, So he's in Las Vegas for concerts. For Fish, the band Fish, right? And his wife doesn't love Fish the way my wife loves Fish. And so there's a bit of a negotiation of time, just like every other marriage, a negotiation of time to say, I need this because it's fruitful for me. Right? But what the book would say is you've already gone too far by saying what you need, because your first step is to figure out what the true needs are of the other person. Right, so I just said, hey, Cameron, I need to go to these 3-4 Fish concerts in Las Vegas for Halloween because I need that recharge or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And what the book would suggest is, at least as one of the big takes I got from it is if you want to ask for that, identify the values of the other person in the conversation first, because he had to ask his wife or talk to his wife about it.
Yeah.
So, that's what I remember of it. And again, like, David, you're going to have to correct me because we might have just been talking about haggling for money. Like, I don't even know, right? I just don't know.
If you made it up on the spot here, you did a great job because it makes sense to me.
And it's a daily thing. Hey, it's like I really was excited about this podcast.
Yeah.
And it's also 5 days before Christmas?
7, right? I don't know. I can't do math.
Yeah,
we're close. We're close enough.
We're close. We're both Jewish, and we're trying to figure it out. And we've talked earlier that like Christmas is not high on our list for either of us, right? But I live in a household where it's like Christmas, right? And so it was a conversation about, you've met my wife and she likes you, so that helps, right?
Katie's a very nice lady.
Right? Helps a lot, but she's the queen bee of the household. And
yeah.
And I don't remember the conversation about it, but it was something like, hey, and she likes you. So it's, it's like, this is an opportunity. And it's like, hey, how should I time this? Right. I think in retrospect, I didn't do a very good job at it. And that it was just kind of like, hey, I got to do this. When should I do it? And the book would have said, get in touch with their feelings first. And so that's part of it. It's like, you can read all the books you want to help change your behavior, but you actually have to like get out of your own habits.
Right. You have to get out of your own way. You have to make a decision.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, you're here now. It's great. so far.
I'm having a good time.
Yeah. I do want to mention it took about 2 months for us to get this hammered down.
Is that a lot or a little?
Uh, Most everyone has come on within a week or two of asking. But you're a busy guy. You're a busy guy. You've got all kinds of things going on.
Oh, hey, let's talk about busy. I wanna specifically identify that word and label that term
Okay.
busy. Okay.
Yeah.
Because it comes up in medicine too. Hey doc, I
Okay.
know you're busy, but do you have time to have this conversation? And it's like, I'm not doing that. You get 24 hours, right, in a day.
Yep.
And
We
7
all
days
have
a week.
24 hours.
And I get 24 hours in a day and 7 days a week. And what you choose to do with your time is what you choose to do with your time. And that is your choices, and those are your values. And it's a luxury to be able to choose that. I get it. But it comes down to your choices. And so I think to validate that, if you're going to say, I'm too busy to do something, I think the message that you're sending in most cases, sometimes unforeseen circumstances, but if you're always too busy to do something, I think the message sometimes more so is, I haven't made this a priority in my own life. Or
I'm glad you said that, because I was going to say what I hear when someone says I'm too busy is I have other priorities.
Yeah.
And you are not one.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I won't ever validate. Like, you just said it, and I was like, it kind of gave me that, like, the podcast world can't see the look you got on my face, which was like, nope. Like, I especially in friendships, like how much you value a healthy friendship, and as I get older, how much more I value healthy friendships. It's like, I really don't want to be too busy for you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think that's a fantastic life lesson for most people. Whenever someone says I'm busy or I'm too busy, it's not a priority, is what they're saying.
Yes. But it also still took me 2 months, and which is longer than other folks. And so it's a humility lesson for me to say, are you packing your schedule so much, leisure or not, right? Are you packing your schedule so much that you can't do the things like this that seem so real and so valuable?
That's an interesting take on it. See, I feel talking about this right now, you're beating yourself up more about it than I have any sort of emotion towards it, of, taking 2 months to get here.
Yeah, it's mine. I'll take it.
Yeah, because I don't know. This is 2 months, whatever.
Right? It's happening.
You're like, damn it! It took me 2 months.
Well, no, it's mine. It's like it's a growth thing for me.
Yeah,
I think, and I think it's me. This is how I work as a person, or at least how historically I have.
Mm-hmm.
Is that for me to change, to make a conscious change, I got to get out of my own way first.
Yeah.
Right. And part of that is like verbalizing things you're doing wrong to people you care about. Right. Or things that you think you can improve. Because the thing is, in 6 months, I can imagine you coming back to me and be like, hey, remember when we talked about busy? Remember when it took you 2 months to get on the podcast? I don't care. But is your life different?
Yeah.
Right. Like, I'm almost like leaving that with you.
Mm-hmm. So, like, a fun fact for you and anyone listening at this point in time in my life, I listen to these recordings. I'm here, in person doing this, and then I'm listening to these recordings about 3 or 4 times. And after I go through them, I will text whoever I just listened to, and I'll be like, dude, you remember when we talked about this? Well, I have also XYZ to say about it, and like, I'll just try to continue conversation about it. And they'll, half the time they're like, what are you talking about? But
it's great.
Yeah, I'm still coming back to it and just chit chatting.
Yeah, I'm like, bring it on. Like, you got something that's like emotionally dense and even potentially able to yield some conflict, and I'm like, oh yeah, let's go there. But you can't text me with it.
Right. It's got to be in person.
Well,
Like for example, on the lighter note, non-emotional, it was more of one thing recently. I haven't listened to the first podcast for a while, The Financial Advisor, but I actually got the opportunity from someone like inviting me on a cruise to Croatia. And I texted him. I sent him the link. I was like, hey, someone invited me on this cruise. I'm going to go try to find your Apple Watch. And he said in the podcast when we had it back in September, like, I dropped my watch in the Adriatic Sea.
Okay.
So I just randomly brought it up 4 or 5 months later.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you're close with people, you can do that. And then even if they have to retrace the steps, text gives them a little time to think.
Yeah.
Right. but then that'll differentiate by different generations, where it's like boomers are going to call every time. And then Gen X is going to call a little bit when they make sure to cover something. And then the messages I'm receiving from the many millennials that I get to hang out with, I'm talking about like I'm 2 months off the cusp. I'm like 2 months into Gen X, right? But
you're very much on that line of Gen X and millennial. Right?
I'm 59 days away from official like millennial, and my friend David Ellis is 45 days away. Like we're that close, right? I did the math on the fly there, but I think I got it, Dave. So yeah, I feel like it's okay to communicate within certain people's modes. Like texting is, there's memes on Facebook about it, like millennial memes, which are like, I text out of respect, because when you call somebody, you're forcing them to talk to you. And when you text them, you give them time. And like my mind exploded where I was like, you are? Can't they just not answer? Like I have to like work to get it.
Right. And like if you call someone and they don't answer, it's like, oh, are you too busy to answer my call?
Yeah. This is a running joke with our mutual friend Eric. that thing exactly, because we talk a lot. Yeah.
So you were talking about millennials, and you said you have a cool hot take about how millennials are coming up, and I really want to dig into this one.
Oh yeah. Wait, so while I'm doing this though, we should make ground rules, right?
Yeah.
Boundaries. No, I'm sorry. That's a bit. Yeah.
Safe words.
Right. Yeah. Sorry. No. All right. No millennial jokes when I talk about this. So with the context that I'm sitting across from somebody from that generation, and that you think about impact in life, right? And like what impact you want to have on other people. And it's something I think about like every day of my life, about impact. And there's like, how am I going to impact people today? Or what's my impact going to be on individuals? And the learning process for me is that each human interaction, even like the grocery store passes, that those matter. Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
And whether we get back to it today or not, like, the one time I ran into somebody in Cambodia where maybe I didn't make the best decisions, and you'd think you'd never see them again because Cambodia, right? But I did. Yeah, we could in the most inopportune places, but it's like every human impact matters, right? So I started thinking, right, what's my impact as a physician? And it's like I go to work, 8-10 hours a day, and you want to be present and humane in every room and have somebody. I mean, the goal is for people to live better, right? And so this is why I went into medicine thing, where it's like, hey, if I could help people live a better life, that feels amazing, right? And so in my early career, it was like, all right, if I can help like X thousand people per year live a better life, that's cool. But if I worked like 3 hours more per day, I could help another 1,000 people. And I was like, oh, let me try that. Like, it was just like, well, what limits do I set? Because in medicine, it's like, hey, you work more? You want to work more? You work more. All right, go for it. But I don't know if the ends were justifying the means. It was like, there's an upper limit on how much you should work.
Yeah.
Like, you should see your kids at dinner. That's my opinion on it. Like,
Absolutely.
you should see your kids at dinner. And so I was thinking about impact, and it's like, all right, there is an upper limit that a physician can impact people in clinical visits, in inpatient, outpatient, whatever you do for your patients. There's an upper limit that you can directly impact people. And I hit it. And so, yeah, I will get to millennials, man. It's the circuitous way to get there.
There's a lot of background to it.
But you got to get there. So I realized it's always been great to teach, and I get to teach the residents from our program at Ohio State that come over to our hospital and get free for their residency 4 months with them out of their 3 years, which is awesome. And our fellows in our department and medical students and even people that are pre-med that want some exposure, like that is incredibly redeeming for me on a daily basis to have people like that around that are just sponges, right? Just like they're like, I want to learn. And when I boil it down, you realize like there's the direct impact on the human. Like they had a good educational experience. They felt like they worked with somebody that really wanted to know what they wanted to know and tried to understand them as humans, like the learners, right? So the role as an educator is awesome. And then as I moved on in my career, I came to this realization that if you put tools in the hands of trainees, if you empower trainees to being, medical students, residents, people at different phases of things, and you give them something that they can take into their career and share with their patients and improve quality of life of their patients beyond what they already knew, you're having this exponential impact. And if you can teach a concept that then they go on and teach, then it's like massive exponential impact. And then then you realize that you're not capped anymore, that there's not like that upper limit of what you can teach people. So then we get to the millennials thing, right? And so I'm thinking, wow, it all of a sudden changed the way I measure myself or my impact on humans. Is all of a sudden I love what I do clinically, but it's really on the educational side, being an impactful teacher, a physician teacher. And who are my students? They're all millennials. All of them, right? And what are people doing about millennials these days? What are boomers and Gen Xers doing about millennials these days?
Complaining.
They're complaining, right? And so I'm like, all right, I'm about to my goal is to have a really big impact on this set of people. I don't want to complain about them. I mean, they're humans. They came up in a certain way. I want to get them. Like, I want to get it, right? Because, and I wasn't thinking about the fact that as I get old and ill, they're going to be taking care of me, which is, by the way, true. But the bigger thing of it's not like they don't have huge skills. I just don't think we get them, right? And luckily, there's this big set of literature about millennials. People are writing a lot about it and how to teach millennials and what they want as a generation. Now, understand that there's all individuals that don't have to act like that. But the overall scope of things is you can't teach a person from this generation like we've taught historically. And you can't interact with them that way because they didn't grow up with that. And so if you read the body of literature, it's like this generation of people have found a way to use the system to such a good ability, right? To be like, I know what I want, and that's what I want, and I want to get it, and that's my approach there. If you're going to get in the way, you can, but this may not work out. When historically, like a lot of previous generations, it was, all right, this is how you make your way through med school. Make sure you impress your attendings. Make sure you keep people happy, right? And there wasn't a lot of individuality there. And so I think the learning thing was when you're teaching somebody, they don't want you just to talk to them like what we're, the endless stream of words I'm providing right now. That is not how this generation's learning. And they will make that clear. You look at like subjective studies about that, like where they just tell you how they learn. They're like, oh, boy, I'm sick of being lectured. Like and then what they were doing a decade ago or so is recording the lectures that people were giving, taking the PowerPoints, speeding their voices up to 2 times whatever it was, and blowing through that 1 hour of content in 10 to 15 minutes or whatever it is. Just flying through it. And so you can go complain about this generation. And I'm like, they just went and did things 4 times faster than we did. Right. And so the more I've read about it and the more I've learned about like your generation of millennials is, if you can figure out, and there's a way to figure it out, if you can figure out what makes these people tick, they are more powerful than any generation prior in terms of mental power, in terms of the fact that they've got the internet and they know how to use it better than we do, right? And even I say the internet, and you're scoffing, where you're like, the internet, it's not just the internet, right? Like,
I didn't.
Right. Yeah. But you know what I mean, right? It's like I have to be humble enough to say that I don't even understand, the powers of tech. I would be asking you about it. I'm at that point in my life, right? And so it takes a point to stop and say, okay, I'm not the expert here. I'm not the expert educator. If I have a new learner, all of them are millennials at this point. There's every once in a while there's an older learner, but not really, right? Stop, pause, humble yourself, look them in the eye. It doesn't take long, and say, hey, how do you learn well? Right? Because classically, it would be me asking you tons of medical questions and you telling me what you know, and then me telling you what you need to go study. That's how medicine worked for years.
Yep.
And then I'm like, all right, here's a multiple choice question. How do you learn well? Do you learn well by teaching others? Do you learn well by reading on your own? Do you learn well by me asking you questions? Probably not, right? You probably, but if you do, cool, I can do that. Do you learn well by drawing pictures? I have a resident this weekend that is going to do some sort of media thing, and we don't know what it's going to be yet, but it's, how do you learn the sensory anatomy of the legs, right? And I'm like, hey, dude, do the modality that's best for you and come back and teach it to me. And me and a group of people, right? Because he's like, I got to learn this. Like, I got to know it now. And I'm like, all right, make a TikTok or like draw it on your leg and take pictures or make a model or whatever you think is going to make this stick so well that you don't have to reread it 5 times in a book, right? And then come teach it to us. And my hope is that tool, like you use this group's modality, that's going to create lasting education, and maybe something that gets taught is something that they then teach further, and you think about your impact. And so I'm going to encourage everybody listening here to read a little bit about millennials and the generation, and what I would suggest, by far more than likely what you're going to find out there in podcast land, is that when you empower this generation, they do so much. And while you can complain all you want, the reason why you're complaining is because you don't get them. And if you work to get them, you don't have a lot to complain about.
That is very true. Sitting here as a millennial, I was thinking, if anyone is disagreeing with you, I challenge them to sit here for 1 week and watch me as a fly on the wall.
Yeah,
because it's not easy doing what I do for 40 hours a week.
Right? Yeah, you told me about it. Yeah, you told me about like
and I call this work as well. It's more fun work, but this is still work that I do on top of my other work, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's so cool seeing how people learn. It's the learning how to learn is a fun thing, right? And it's figuring it out for yourself. And we have, the old archaic way of, schools and, just being talked to about whatever subject and then taking a test. And then, I do agree with you. The millennial generation is changing that, right? And it's just fascinating watching it unfold and hoping that the younger people are, doing the same thing, and they're actually getting these new learning techniques like indoctrinated in them.
Yeah.
Right, because I was still on that end of listening to a lecture and taking a test and writing the paper, and it sucked.
Didn't work.
Yeah, it sucked. I hated it. I hated school.
Yeah.
I was not exactly a good student because I didn't learn that way.
But you learn enough to be where you are.
Right.
And maybe it's like, maybe the content, who knows if it's stuck or not.
Yeah.
But and this is, another hour we could talk about the value of hardship. And there's another book about it, right? Like about allowing people to fail. Again, I'm going to paraphrase the title of it. I just started it, but it's like that whole thing about like the gift of failure, where it's like, yes, hardship, like school was hard. School didn't work, but you got a good thing going, man, right? And so did that hardship get you to a place where you are, where it's like, yeah, you know what you want to do, and you're spending 40 hours a week doing what you want to be doing.
Right.
Mostly. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, is there any like resources you would recommend for people to read about millennials?
Oh, I mean, I'm going to flip the question on you.
Oh boy.
So you're a millennial, right?
Yes.
And you can find information and useful information faster and better than a Gen Xer can. Right.
Yep. Okay.
So what would you do?
What would I do?
Yeah.
I would actually go straight to Google and just say like millennial book or millennial research paper or millennial white paper, like scholarly article about millennials, like things like that.
Yes, I'm glad I flipped the table on you. I went to Google Scholar, like scholar.google.com. That's
Google Scholar is a fantastic resource.
Right. So we did the same thing, but it's a situation where it's like you will probably find that content. You'll find better content than I will, and you'll find it faster, and you'll find more meaningful content, and you will pour through it in a high yield way faster than I will.
It's fair enough.
Yeah, and for this is like the moment for gratitude, and that I can be thankful that the future generation of the world right now can do that so efficiently. And I really believe in millennials. I don't have to, right? It would be so much easier to complain.
Oh, it's so much easier to complain.
But I don't feel that way.
Can I tell you one thing? I just want to like do one thing that I can brag about today.
Bring it on.
I don't usually brag about things, but I will brag about this.
Bring it on.
I took the first hour of my day after I got out of bed and made coffee, and I learned about like NFTs, right? There's a whole lot of news about it, and I'm kind of a computer person, and I didn't know shit about NFTs until today. I knew that there was a couple of, fun facts about them. But this morning I took 1 hour and I was like, all right, cool. I know enough about NFTs to get me by. If I really wanted to be serious about it, I could spend another 5 hours and do it. And then I could really get into that hobby in that space. But hour's all I need.
Yeah. That's awesome. Like a devotion to learning.
Yeah.
Because you felt there was no necessity there, right?
No, I have no reason to really purchase an NFT.
Yeah. But when somebody asks you if you want one now, where it's like, hey, this limited edition video of LeBron James dunking can be purchased. You can make a decision that's educated about whether or not you feel like you need to own a limited edition video of LeBron James dunking that only exists in digital form.
Oh, yeah. And then I have the rebuttal questions of, well, how many of these NFTs exist, or when is it minted, and how much are people willing to pay for it right now, and all that.
And what is the value of ownership of anything? Whoa. I know. Whoa. That like we've gone beyond material ownership. Things don't take up space.
Right.
And that's really cool, actually, because it's kind of annoying to have a lot of stuff, in my opinion.
I'm excited for the transformation to like the real world to be like Ready Player One. If you've seen the movie or read the book, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. You're ready for it. I also a not popular. It's an opinion that I have that people are like never thought about it. About up in the burbs where we live, and everybody's playing video games, right? And you don't buy the game anymore. You buy content in the game, or you buy a skin. It's like all right, so you're gonna spend like $10 on a suit that your person with a gun wears, but the suit doesn't help you perform in any way. You just look at it, and other people see you wearing it. And so it's like going to a store at the mall and buying more clothes, right?
Yeah.
Except you don't own it, really. It's in the screen. You can't take it out of the screen. And it's like, from a very rational standpoint, it's like, it's useless, right? But from the standpoint of a parent, if my kids have $10 to spend, and the $10 they spend doesn't fill our house with more stuff, it's the best $10 I can imagine. Because what did you buy? What have you bought in your first 12 years of life that still has any value to you? Is there anything?
I don't think so.
Right. So
there's nothing I can think of.
You're going to amass junk that has temporary value, and it's going to be gone. Then it's going to be junk in landfill or wherever it ends up. Like very little that you buy with your own money. Like, the teddy bear was probably bought by your parents, the one that has the value, right?
Right.
So everything that you purchase until you're a certain age is just junk. Right. And I can only imagine if you're going to do all that purchasing anyway, and you're going to get that dopamine rush from buying something, that how awesome would it be if it didn't have to take up space and never had to get thrown away and got played with just like anything else and had just about the same amount of not so much value, and it was just kind of there inside a box and a screen in the internet world.
Yeah.
And then you take that and you extrapolate that into the adult world of buying stuff that really doesn't make it, this is an opinion here, but doesn't really make things better. And it's like, all right, that's where NFTs make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Like if you're going to buy stuff and it doesn't take up space and it gives you that little bit of value there, it's pretty awesome.
Yeah. I actually heard this really cool, like, explain it to me like I'm 5 explanation of NFTs, where so you saw I have a poster of Starry Night in my living room.
Yes.
So buying an NFT is like actually purchasing the real Starry Night, but digital. And anyone can just come and screenshot your NFT. That screenshot of the NFT is the poster of Starry Night that I have. I don't have the real one. I just have a copy, and it doesn't show that I own it. Right? Whoever owns it, MoMA or whoever owns Starry Night, right?
Yeah.
That's the easy explanation. Like I'm 5 of NFTs.
Yeah.
And
we should probably clarify for audience, non-fungible tokens.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
Yeah. And then you got to type that in the Google box just to get like a start. Yeah.
Yeah. So I found that to be a really cool, easy explanation of NFTs, and I still barely understand it. That's about the most understanding of why I would buy an NFT is I don't have to have it taking up space.
Yeah. Hey, can I change direction?
Yeah, absolutely.
I want to make sure you completed your thought though about that.
Yeah, I'm good.
Because it got me thinking about somebody.
All right, let's hear it.
And man, if this ends up being all about influential people in my life and not about my life, that's a win, right? And so my first introduction to NFTs is this guy named Ross. He lives out in Seattle, but he was out in Portland because I was out in Portland. I went to visit my friend Trevor out in Portland. About a year and a half ago. Never heard of the term NFT at that point. And I will tell you, it's such a strange thing. I'm really thankful for friendships, right? Really, and I think it's really important. I think it's important to tell your friends, and I'll tell you this right now. Like, I'm thankful for your friendship, like a real friendship where we talk about real things and care for each other. But I've also had rocky friendships, and I've had periods of my life where I haven't had a lot of friendships, and I felt like I don't have a lot of people to rely on or people to lean into. But Ross and Trevor are part of now a set of like a lot of people as I start naming them, and pardon me if I leave anybody out, but of these men that are all over 6'2", they're all tall, and they're all charming. Right. And they go into a room and they just light it up. And they're like, in a good way, like they don't necessarily draw a lot of attention, but if somebody comes near them, their charm is going to win this. And they're all a little weird, but it's like the weird charm, right? And so like I'm thinking about there's like Ross in Seattle, and there's, as I go through the map, and there's Trevor in Portland, and then we go over to Colorado, there's my buddy Levi, and he can do that, right? Get down to New Orleans, and Ryan is down into New Orleans, and I'm going to leave a few people out, and I love you guys. But there's more, right? And Ross is the one that introduced me to NFTs because it's like one of these characteristics. And these almost all of you guys out there that are these charming tall men, right? Almost have such a high level of creativity. There's a certain subset of person that like we don't even talk that often, right? So Ross, I was like, hey Ross, I'm going to be in Portland. I haven't talked to you in 6 months, but when we talk, it's like an hour of greatness, you know? And he's like, I'll be there, you know? Yes. Right. And there was nothing to swim through. I hadn't seen the guy in like 3 or 4 years, probably, or 5, who knows how long. And we went probably within 5 minutes from, hey, how are you? Nice, give me a big hug, introduce me to your girlfriend that I've never met, to a deep conversation about non-fungible tokens, right? And I want to point out, I feel like a lot of this podcast, as I've listened to it, is about humanity, is about like the human condition.
Yes.
And it got me thinking non-fungible tokens and that long conversation that Trevor and Ross and Ross's girlfriend, oh, you're so cool too. And I was so bad with names. Oh no, I'm sorry. It's not, you're great. And I'm sorry about the name thing because it's just not coming right now. But bright, shiny eyes, great person. The really exciting part about Ross and this set of people is the ability to tap into humanity quickly, right? And to have the strange conversations right away, right? And like almost drop so much humane content. Like NFTs themselves, I understand they aren't humane, but we went quickly from a definition to NFTs to how you and I got into it of like, what does an NFT mean to a human, right? And what does it mean to you emotionally? And what is the true value to a human? Like it got right there. And I wanted to point out my thanks for, or like what my gratitude for people like that can just dig right in. And I'm also clearly my magnetism to that. A deeper conversation for maybe another day would be, how do I bring those people in, right? Like, do I do that? I don't know. I'm not sure if I do.
I can feel that similar way with another buddy who came in for an episode that we hadn't talked in like 8 months, and we're like the best of friends. We hadn't talked in like 8 months, and sends me a message, hey man, can I come and do a podcast episode? Absolutely, come on down. And he walks through the door of my house, and it's like nothing. Nothing happened. There was no break, right? We just, hey, how's it going? Deep conversation, and just catching up and all that. And those are the best friendships.
Yeah. It's like public service announcement. If you're feeling empty, or even if you're not, and you know those people are out there, have you texted them recently?
Yeah.
Or have you called them, depending on your generation? Or have you reached out to them because they're going to give you something right away, like those humans? And as I think about it, I'm like, I got a call today that I have not yet called back from a certain Ryan in Brooklyn. That's like, oh yeah, like right away.
Yep.
We have years that separate us when we don't talk, but like right away, I'm like, I can't wait for that big burst of humanity conversation.
Yeah. You nailed it. Those are the best. Is there anything that you wanted to mention about this anymore? Because I'm also gonna change the direction.
Do it, man. Do it.
Okay.
No, that's great.
So I wanted to bring it into like how you came from the outside of Milwaukee to go through school and decide to be a physician.
Oh, great. Yeah.
How did that happen?
Good question. Yeah. So, yeah. Who was it? Another lesson in one of these books was like, before you talk, stop and think, and then talk. And the silence that you provide is really never noticed as much as you think it is. All right, hold on. Count to 5 in my head. Ready? Go. All right. And now this is more well thought out, because I've always struggled to answer this question. My father is now retired, but pediatrician. His father, pediatrician, right? And me, I do work at a children's hospital. Now that we're this far into the podcast and I haven't said anything that's like incriminating, then I can be like, yeah, I work at the children's hospital here, right? This is okay for public consumption. Not that I have a lot of incriminating to say, but still, you think about it, right?
No.
And then I take care of children, and it's awesome. So I grew up watching my father have impact, and hearing him talk about his own father and hearing people talk. I never met my grandfather on that side, Sam. Never met him, but his impact was huge. And Nathan Samuel, that's me, right? That's my grandfather in the middle name right there. Jewish tradition is you don't name somebody until the person's passed. You don't pass that name on. So he had passed by the time I was born. And so he was a big name, right? Him and his wife Molly, Grandma Molly, Annie Rosenberg. I just gave out my last name. There we go, and that's okay too. Who hears this and I say Grandma Molly or I say Molly Rosenberg, everybody just melts, right? Like the matriarch of all things in our family. And so there was this legacy that was there, and there was my father as the second generation of that. And I think I realized really early that his daily work was incredibly rewarding to him. When you often hear the word rewarding, you think about money. And I'm going to be honest, I thought about money. Wasn't the biggest thing though. Like the other part was that I realized that it gave him value, and that he had an opportunity to positively impact people's lives on a daily basis. And he was a pediatrician in the north suburbs of Milwaukee. He worked where we lived. And so he was taking care of my friends. He was taking care of my, kids in the neighborhood. Like, he was, and I watched him positively impact people. And so that always felt like something that I felt like that would make me feel good inside. So that was important. And then the other part, quite honestly, that was important to me was I knew from an early age that I didn't want to have to like worry about not having resources. And you don't have to be rich. You don't have to get rich to do it. And anybody that chooses to work in anything pediatric realizes that if you do that, you're not directly chasing money because it's pediatric anything, right? It's not that. But physicians in the United States are able to take care of their families, send their kids to college, eat nice cheese, and not think twice. Whatever. I'm being honest about it, right? And then I watched him be able to have really expensive canoes because that's what my dad had, right? Like, and I'll be honest, like that had to at least factor into it, but it was a lot lower. It was like, that's a prerequisite for a job I want to do, is I want to be able to be financially comfortable. But there's all kinds of jobs you could do. I mean, you could do science research stuff, and you could be a lawyer, you could be a workman's comp lawyer, you could be anything, right? And have it meet that criteria. But the bigger thing is that I wanted to go into work every day, excited to go in there, and I wanted to leave every day, and feel like I had a positive impact, or at least I built towards a positive impact for the next day. And I know there are physicians that can't say that every day, but I'll also say, if anybody's ever thinking about going into the field that I'm specifically in, like the subspecialty in pediatrics, that this is real. Every day I'm excited to go in there. Every single one at the hospital I work at for the last 8.5 years. And I feel like I knew I saw that coming, right? So that decision was made at a really young age, and it was just, hey, I'm going to go to college in order to get myself to the next step, which is medical school, and ideally learn a lot of other things besides medicine on the way there.
So that's a fantastic take on why you chose that career path, and I think that's so cool. But can you walk us through your, I guess, the steps that you took through school to get to where you are? How was it going through like med school, and I don't know what you did to get a bachelor's, but pre-med or whatever.
Yeah. So I was at one of those high schools where take a bunch of AP classes, and I've learned this isn't true anymore, but it was true that you could just come in with real college credits that counted in college. Apparently that's not so doable anymore. Like my nephews that are graduating high school are like, your AP credits don't count anymore, apparently, right? So don't even take the AP classes because they don't count. But also I was at Milwaukee Jewish Day School for a period of time, learned Hebrew, and then went to such a Jewish high school. It was public high school, right? Nikolai High School, but such a thick density of Jews that they offered Hebrew. And so there was that, but there's only so much you could do at a high school level. A lot of us left Milwaukee Jewish Day School pretty close to fluent in Hebrew. So then we went off to college while we were in high school and took Hebrew. And I came in college very goal directed. Like goal number one academically is get yourself into medical school. And then the other part was like, have some fun, right? And so I was lucky to come in with a lot of credits. And then I looked and I said, okay, which major can I do that gets me all the pre-medicine prerequisites, and ideally doesn't take that many more credits or classes taken, so I can learn some other stuff, right? Like the pre-med stuff, I just got to get it done and ideally get good grades in it. And so
you can take some classes that you enjoy.
Well, and you have to, like,
yeah.
I mean, I guess you don't have to, but it's like you're going to take some humanities, and there was almost no Hebrew left. But you know what? I don't even think I took any in Madison. I just took it when I was in high school. But it was like college credits coming in, right? And so, yeah, there's like the core stuff I had to do is always 3 classes for a semester. It was like core sciencey stuff to get to a molecular biology major. And then people are like, what's molecular biology? And I'm like, I think it's what it is. Like, as they're saying, it's like molecules in biology, right? Like, I'm not going to be a molecular biologist. I'm going to meet the exact criteria for this major. And then there's going to be all these other requirements, right? So it's like you can fulfill humanities credits by taking music classes, right? And I was like, all right, cool. Like, I just wanted to fill all the little boxes. And then, what's the best way to optimize the situation, right? Learn the science, and I did, right? But it's like, what are you going to do? Oh, there's a class you can take 4 times, and it counts towards this credit that I need to fill anyway. That's called black music, right?
What is that?
It's African American music.
Okay.
Right. So it's taught by Richard Davis. And Richard Davis, more bibliography information. Go back and look at a bunch of Eric Dolphy's jazz albums, and Richard Davis is the basis on there. But that's not what you've probably heard the most out there in podcast land. You've probably heard Van Morrison's Astro Weeks.
I know Van Morrison.
Yeah, right. And Astro Weeks is the album you'll probably know the best, and that basis is Richard Davis. And as I understand that album, the music was recorded first, and then Van Morrison wrote all the words.
Interesting.
So you go back to Astro Weeks and think about it that way, and all of a sudden your mind explodes when you listen to that album. You shut off Van Morrison's voice and you listen to the music back there, and you're like, oh yeah, so good. Now, how did Richard Davis get to University of Wisconsin? I don't know. I'm not sure. He came in as a professor, and I'm not sure he made his way up the ranks. He probably didn't. But
did he walk around campus as like a celebrity? The big shot.
Everybody knew who he was,
definitely.
Yeah, like if he ever played shows like on the academic side and like the music department, like he just kind of went, and it was like he get to see Richard play. Yeah, but getting into his class required waking up at 5:30 a.m. and calling him on a certain day, and he'd ask you some questions that were always difficult, right? And you had to, in retrospect, I realized you had to answer with humility. He wanted humans in his class. He didn't want people just fulfilling credits. Because when you get in that class, we all just sat in a theater, and he had assigned seats for us, 1 seat apart from everybody else. So you couldn't really reach over and talk to anybody else. But there was still some conversation in the class. There was probably 50 people in there. And he had lessons to teach every day. There was no curriculum. There was no syllabus. There was one day that one of our exams was his birthday, and he's like, "You're not taking it. You're all getting an A." Like, that's how this class went. But this underscores the value of an education, because of like college education, is if you can find those pearls in your college education. I learned so much from the stuff that his mannerisms, his behaviors, his expectations of humans, right? The things that pissed him off. And boy, like, I knew what pissed him off, and I wasn't going to do it. Like, Richard Davis doesn't remember me, and that's good, right? Like, and I didn't, you'd have to piss him off for him to remember you, because he gets through a lot of students. But 4 semesters of that, there was always listening homework. You always had to listen to something and come back in with it. He expected that you'd get it when you come back, right?
So do you remember any of those sort of assignments? Like, hey, listen to this album, and then that's your homework. And then what do you do when you get to class? Like, say,
I was scared to death, man. I don't know. It was like MP3s. It was like right after Napster. So it was like, click on these MP3s, and you plug your headphones into your computer, and you listen once, and you're like, what am I supposed to be getting here? And there was some background to the curriculum. Like, there definitely was some background of like what you're supposed to be getting. And it was content. Like, I'm thankful that Madison is a city where like music lovers are everywhere. And I was playing in a few bands at that point, never anything good, but that like the music scene is great in Madison. And so I felt like I was a part of that. And so it was like, did I know Eric Dolphy's albums before I went to any Richard Davis classes? Yeah. Did I know him well? No. Right. But at least I felt like I knew what I was coming into there. I don't think he ever asked me a question in class. Nor if I said something, I can't remember if I ever did. That was like a consumption kind of class. There were some vocal people in there, but I think they were his jazz students. and I was well aware of my lack of musical talent. I wasn't taking jazz like performance class from this guy. No way. No. No, but he had some stories. He told some stories, man. So he played with Miles Davis, and so he had like those stories of like how wild Miles Davis was. But like, that's what I remember from college. It's like, yeah, I know I was going into medical school, but I was just I had to take humanities classes, and I was like, this better be great, right? And so I hope almost everything I took a lot of math too because I found it fun, but like the goal with all that was pleasure. It was like, I want to learn things I want to learn. I don't want this to feel like work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, I'm sure the I don't know, the medical classes probably felt more like work because it was more like the background stuff that you wanted to do, right? You have the goals of up here, but you got to get through this background, the foundation, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Although I don't know. I'm that guy that also gets excited about organic chemistry and like the lines and like the patterns of how molecules work, and I'm also the doctor that wants to bring it in and be like, hey, that medicine we're talking about, do you know how molecularly similar it is to another medicine, and that we choose to use them differently, right? That was a conversation 2 days ago, right? Or yesterday. Was that yesterday? Yeah, I was talking to somebody I work with where it's like, organic chemistry coming back to slap us in the face. Like, I enjoyed it. I think that you can find positives in nearly every experience in life, and you probably thrive better if you can.
Absolutely. So is there anything else you wanted to mention on that side of school? Because there is a really cool thing that you mentioned to me earlier that I wanted to get into.
I think, yeah, and we can transition. This will transition into it that you have like your friends from a certain class, right? And that I spent a lot of college not in college.
Right.
And so I have friends that graduated in like 4 years or 5 years. My roommate in 5 years, and I think it's great if you know that this is your last education, 4 and 5 years in undergrad. Great idea. But if you're looking at 4 more years of medical school, and for me 6 years of post medical school training afterwards, I was like, I could probably use not doing this. And it was like my junior year, and it was late spring too. And my whole thing was like, check all your boxes. And I kind of had a tab on it, and I was like, I don't really even know what I'm doing next year because I think I've got them all covered. I think. And this guy calls me, and he's like, it's University of Wisconsin, like huge school, not a lot of personal education. It's not like your advisor, and I certainly didn't know my advisor. He's like, hey, I'm your advisor. And I was like, I have an advisor? This is cool. Like, really? I was like, hey, what you calling about on my landline? Like, what's up, He's like, are you going to graduate? And I'm like, I hope so. Like, yeah. He's like, now? And I was like, excuse me? Like, what do you mean? He's like, it takes 120 credits to graduate. You have 120 credits. This is like the end of my third year. And I took summer classes. It wasn't like, it ended up being probably the same amount. I took summer classes because I took music classes in the summer. There was also an appreciation music class where like you just go and listen to orchestras play and then fill out questions about the orchestra. It's like, that's college credit class, right? I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. That was fun. Yeah. They did some Philip Glass stuff. Side note from the podcast, like that was a wild day. I'll tell you about it some other time. But and he's like, and I was like, well, my major, they're like molecular biology, and I was like, all right, cool. Like I still don't know what a molecular biologist is, right? He's like, do you want to graduate? And I was like, yeah. Like that was it. So I graduated with none of my friends, and I was gonna stay in Madison because it's an awesome city anyway, and live like a college kid. I got a job at a lab. But I was like 21, and I don't think this is like intelligence that got me there or like hard work even. I'm not even going to say it was that. There was like just dumb luck and opportunism there. Like that's all it was. And just saying, all right, like I know I've got a lot more ahead of me. It's not, I didn't take a ton of credits per semester even. The math just worked out just the line just right. And I was just like, all right, cool. Like I certainly don't miss the fourth year of college there, but what it left me as is like a 21-year-old college-minded kid that wasn't taking classes, surrounded by people that were like studying. And like all I wanted to do, is had some bands I was playing in. I was like, can you guys play like every day of the week? and my dear friend Mike said yes the most. He was still in school, right? Drummer Mike.
Okay.
He is not 6'2", but you'd think he would be in terms of this category of people. Who's now a neuroradiologist in Phoenix, but he kept saying yes. Great drummer, great mind. I love him.
It's fantastic. I wanna connect with this guy someday.
All right, man. So all we need to do is like say, hey, Mike, Columbus, Ohio, awesome place to visit. Worth all your time. You should see our convention center, or something like that. All right, I've got a drum kit in the basement, Mike. Let's do this. Let's go back to the great days of the band called Unnecessary Sweater.
Unnecessary Sweater was one of your band names.
Yeah, and play our hit tune McNasty.
Ooh.
Yeah, which Mike sent me like 2 years ago. Mike sent me a recording. He had a McNasty. I didn't think one ever existed. He sent me a recording, and I happened to have my son next to me when I played it. My 11-year-old. He'll be 12 soon. And he's like, "Oh, that sounds like real music." And I was like, "Dude, that's me." And he's like, "It's not." And then he listened to it more, and he's like, "Yeah, it's you." It's like, if you want to see the ultimate truth, just ask your kids about you. You're like, yeah, they'll tell you.
Wow. I want to hear Mike. I want to hear McNasty here live in Columbus. Let's do it.
Mm-hmm.
Let's plan a trip for you to come out here.
All right. Mike, fast forward to this section of the podcast where you are featured, and David Ellis will play bass. I don't think he plays bass, but there we are.
He'll figure it out before you get here.
Yeah. Oh yeah. We could, all the shout outs could end up in here. Like Ross could do the sound because that's his next new cool thing, right? And,
yeah.
Well, Levi can play bass in Denver, and I mentioned Trevor. He could play guitar.
We're just gonna get all the people, round them up. They're coming to Columbus.
Yeah, but no, because the most interesting friends always have something to do.
So you're saying they're busy?
Well, no, you're right. You're absolutely right, and they all are like that. And I don't hold them accountable because I would probably have similar responses, and maybe each of us individually could get into a deep dive on that topic.
Yeah, I had to bring us full circle here.
That was well done. That was great.
Thank you. I appreciate it. So making it through school, got all these cool friends, and then you are set up to graduate early, and then you do so, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then what?
Suspense. Because there is a really cool thing that happened, and it wasn't me working in a lab for 2 years, because that did happen, and there's nothing cool about that. But I realized you touched on something like a huge pivotal part of my life, of getting through school and making friends in school. And I got to talk about the Burrito Boys before we get into the trip around the world, which we'll talk about, right?
Ooh, let's do it.
But I got to talk about the Burrito Boys because I think that Burrito Boys taught me what it was like to have like a friendship, like a real friendship, and value those things. We talk about it. I can tell you forever about how I don't value material possessions, but friendships, right? Like worth so much investment. And Burrito Night itself came around my sophomore year when I just wanted to get the people I love together. And it was like, let's make burritos. And the first rendition of burritos, is like bring some people together that have similar feelings about music and each other. And the first burritos were pretty archaic, like the burritos that we made. We're just getting creative. And there was a few like Shawnee, one of the burrito guys, he's like not maybe a classic burrito boy, but one of the guys that we hung out with a lot, brought beef for stew one time for the burritos. Like that's what he bought. And I was like, I don't know. And so it ended up not being like a Chipotle burrito, but also like having a very clear recipe. Like every one of the 5 major Burrito Boys, the ones that we've had a chat going for 15 years now, 20 years, we know what the recipe is and we can say it left and right. But we would get together every Wednesday, and that was sacred time. And that sacred time at that point in our life was no women. Right. It was, and for like a decade, burrito night was no women. We tried to do it on Wednesdays. We'd get together, we'd hang out, and these people became the people that knew me best. Right. And so, what does that mean for a guy like me? It means that they found all of my weakest points, and they have for the last 20 years, right, and made them very visible to me. And that's not it. Like, there's still the love there, and we cared for each other, and we've got all the best stories about the stuff that we've all done together. And we almost got together 2 months ago, but I went and got COVID and I didn't go. But I mean, yeah, we're still doing it, right? And it also brings you back to those friendships. Like, that was you guys are my original, like, tight bunch of friends, right? And our chat is active still. Like, we still talk a lot, and we do always want to see each other. And when each burrito boy got married, and we're all now wearing rings, that was a big deal, right? Like, that was so great to see each other. And so, a few lessons from burrito boys in college that I thought were really important. One of them is you should keep the people around you that keep you humble and maybe make you hurt a little bit, right? Like, these same guys that always knew I wanted a nickname, and that's why I never got a nickname, right? That, like, and it's still a great joke that there were a lot of good nicknames that would have fit me, and they refused it because they knew I wanted it. Because it's one of those things, like, you know, keep me humble, and I need it, man. Like, I really need it. So that was a really big part of Burrito Boys. And then there was another one that I'm all of a sudden losing my grasp on, about, like, meaningful things about being a burrito boy, and I'm all of a sudden losing it. And so I may have to let this one pass because I had a second thought about the value of these guys in my life, because it's big, right? But it can't be that big, Nathan. You completely forgot about it, right? But it's there. Oh, yeah. An awesome tidbit about this is that I'm the only, Jewish Nathan Samuel, right? The burrito boys are Chris, Ryan Christopher, and Nathan Samuel.
It's a lot of Chris.
And so what we ended up with is Tall Chris. One guy's named Captain, just because. There's a reason. We don't need to get into it. One of them's named by his last name, who's also tall and on the list of charming men, right? And then, because we needed to name the other Chris and we didn't have a good one, we had Tall Chris, and so this guy became Medium Chris.
Very creative.
Medium Chris and I, who did my longest fish tour together, like seeing fish and driving through the parking lots and selling grilled cheese sandwiches in the parking lots. So
Let's get to that in a little bit.
All right, we can hold off on that. So the aside, sorry, I took you on the aside because I couldn't leave the Burrito Boys out in terms of, like, meaningful life growth. I was going to go to medical school, right? And what do? You got to check all the boxes. You got to take that MCAT test and get a number that suits the schools, and you have to do research, and you have to have good grades, and you have to make your application look pretty and write in retrospect, my essay was probably junk. You have to write personal statements for, like, every step through medicine, and only with the tutelage of the great Campbell Stewart did I realize, another great influential person in my life, did I realize that writing a meaningful personal statement really helps you get places, right? And that was in medical school. So I had the application in place. I thought I was good, and I wanted to stay in Madison. I wanted to be able to play with Unnecessary Sweater, right, on, like, a medical school weekday night, which in retrospect would not have worked because I wouldn't have passed, right? But that's what I wanted. I wanted to stay in Madison, go to medical school in Madison, and in terms of what they needed, I thought I had it, right? And I went to interview that day. I had hair down to my back, which in Madison, Wisconsin is probably okay, right? Probably. And at the last second, my interviewers changed, and somebody canceled, and I had to interview with the dean, which is fine, right? and he's an anatomy professor. And I literally went to work in the morning before my interview across the street from the medical school. I worked in a lab across the street, and went across the street from my interview. I actually went back to work afterwards. It was just a day, and I was just like, I'll do my best, hopefully make this work out. And the dean and I were talking about like real life knowledge, because it was my thing in college where it was like, take all the other classes besides medicine, because I'm not sure, but I bet you like patients are going to want a human in there, right? They're going to want somebody that gets humanity. And he's like, I remember him saying clearly, he's like, hey, that's a great point. And I teach anatomy, and I think like my students need to know this too. And he's like, so here's an example of it. Like, Achilles? And I was like, who? He's like, Achilles. And it's just this like horrible, terrible, awkward silence where it's like, I know everything about humanity, right? Except for the one reference you're giving me. And he started telling me about this Greek person with the heel and whatever. And I'm like, and I didn't have a chance to say, oh, Achilles, right? Like I just didn't get there. He's an anatomy guy, and so Achilles, that would make sense for him, right? And the way the conversation went, it didn't happen. And everything that came after that was like the worst first date you've ever had. Like, just like, I think he and I both just wanted the time in the room to end. It was just like, when can we find a safe conclusion for this experience? Or I was like, or for me, I'm like, how can I save myself, Dean Bursu? Right? If you're out there, Ed Bursu, it's been a long time, man. I should give you a call. I learned a lot from that. And one thing I learned is that I didn't get in. And that was tough for me. I applied to a bunch of other schools. Like, it's not irrational to think that you're not going to get into the school you want to in medical school. It's competitive, right? Applied to where I ended up going and a bunch of other schools. And so I didn't get into Wisconsin, and I was like, all right, you guys have a wait list. They're like, you're on the wait list. You're just too low on it, and we're not going to get to you. They were honest, which I appreciate, actually. But I was talking to a friend of mine. Again, I get to do so many shout outs today. This is so cool. So I was talking to a buddy of mine named Ben Steinberg. Big fish head. Good dude. A good dad, too, I can just tell, Loves his kids, right? This is way pre-children, right? And he said, hey, man, my brother, he's a doctor. You know what he did? You speak Hebrew, Nathan. You should do this. Go travel, the beaches, right? The beaches in Thailand and wherever. There's Israelis everywhere because they get out of the army and they travel. And, if you speak Hebrew, you're going to fit right in. You can just travel and see stuff. And it's like, you mean leave the United States? Americans don't do that. Let's look up some data about, percentage of Americans that own a passport, right? Americans don't leave, right? But I started looking into it. I had a friend, Noel Gickling. I'm going to call everybody out today, right? Who was living in Costa Rica then, like right at that moment, college buddy. He should be 6'2" too, by the way. He's not, but he should be. And I was like, I started reading books. This is what I do when I get excited about something, because I was just going to travel for a year and then try again for medical school. So I started reading books, and I do that every time I get excited about something. And I'm like, I could think of all these countries. During this time when I had this job, I got in the habit of just buying every guitar I could find that looked like it was the right price and fixing a few parts on it. Nothing that required skill, just like quick replacements. And this is the heyday of eBay, and I just pop them back up on eBay. I probably went through a couple hundred guitars, much to my roommate Matt's dismay, because there were just piles of guitars in the apartment. I'd plug them in, and they'd shriek and break his ears, and I remember him hating me for it. But I sold all those guitars, just all of them. And at least with that and some money I'd saved, I was like, all right, I can take a whole year and travel, but only third world countries, right? And I can leave in January. I can come back for interviews, maybe probably just go back to Asia, wherever I was, and then ideally go to medical school the next year. And I took a practice trip to Costa Rica. I've since been back a bunch of times, and hopefully aim to bring the kids there in March. And and saw Noel, and some great stories from that trip. Some funny stories from that trip. Noel and my friend Adam, and Noel and I are still in touch. You're thankful for your friends of 20 years that you're still in touch with, and so I took this practice trip, came back just so excited, right, to take this whole trip. Don't come back, just leave, mostly by myself. And I was getting the things in place, and I've just like written off medical school. I'll come back 6-7 months. I'm gonna go there eventually. Like I don't really have another life plan, so I'm gonna make it work. And University of Vermont calls, and they say, "You're in." This is Burlington, Vermont. For those of you that have been there, everybody would want to live there if they were me, right? Like, oh, Burlington, Vermont. Yeah, the city where my favorite band came from and where some of them still live, and next to mountains and snow and great food and all the things. Like Burlington, I could talk about it forever, right? And they called, they said, "Hey, you can go to medical school here, and you can go to medical school." And I was like, oh, all right. Well, I planned this whole trip, and all of a sudden, I think this is going to be formative, right? Like, oh, shoot. And so I called him, and I said, "Hey, does anybody ever, like, get in and then come the next year?" Like, a great motto for mine in life: ask for what you want, even if it seems irrational, as long as you're not, like, offending somebody, right? Just see, explore something. And they said, sure, right? And they said, one person decided they wanted to go on tour with their band for a year, and then they came back, right? And he ended up in my class too, and was in retrospect, it's funny because it was a Kiss cover band that he was touring with, right? Jason. So they said, sure, do this. I just remember, actually, I had like an office with one window and a bunch of molecular biology junk. I didn't really enjoy that job, and I remember like even like falling on the ground and laying back and just looking at this guy and just being like, yes, like this is all falling into place. I've got 9 months to travel, and then just make sure I end up in Burlington, Vermont, September 1st or whatever. And that was just so exciting to me. And I was going to go eastward around the world, and had it planned, but it was totally ready to pivot at any point, and make sure I just saved enough money. And being a cheap backpacker is the thing to do. The thing that started the trip was birthright.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right? And being the economical opportunist that I want to be, right? Birthright, for those of you unaware, Google it. Millennials, go. Is a free trip to Israel for Jews. And I met age criteria, and I'm at least Jewish enough, and so I was going to time it so that I was going to do birthright. And then I called them and I said, "Can you it's free. It's 100% free. Like, you don't open your wallet unless you want to buy a souvenir." And so my whole plan was go and do that to start off the trip. That gets you over the Atlantic Ocean. And I'd love to go to Israel, sure, right? There's history there. There's a lot there. And I was like, "Hey, can you just book it a one-way trip, because I'm staying out there." And they're like, "We have to book you a round-trip flight." I was like, "All right, sorry."
We're gonna miss that flight.
Yeah, if you look at the financials of birthright, they're fine, and I'm not worried about it. So there's like 10 days of birthright to start off the trip, and a criticism of me, which is completely valid, is I don't like being told what to do and when to do it. And that was like a 10-day organized trip, and like a weekend, I was just like, oh, this is bad. And also, without getting into politics too much, because I don't really think sharing political opinions on the internet has a lot of value, really. But there was a little bit of glorification of the death of non-Zionists. And I remember just being like, I'm not going to share my views because my views don't matter as much in the situation, but can you really glorify the death of anybody ever? And that's another conversation about like how you feel about humans, that even the most evil human or the wrongdoing human, is their death ever a celebration? Right.
That's an interesting thought to leave someone with.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and you can have your opinion. I don't even need to argue with it. I can just like, if you ever curious, like, how do I feel about it? I'm like, well, a person's death, untimely death, is, I don't think, ever worth celebrating. And I don't think that evil is born either. So this is my own opinion, right? That like it's a product of people's upbringing or whatever it is, and that you can learn from every human in the world, but once they're dead, you can only learn what happened to them, right? So that was not well accepted on my Birthright Israel trip when there was the conversation of the death of many Lebanese people, but that happened. And then everybody got on the plane to leave, and I kind of waved goodbye and just never got on the plane. And started going south and then walked across to Jordan. So if you cross it a lot at the southern border, the Red Sea's right there, you know, all the great stuff in Jordan. I had a buddy from Madison with me still at this point, and you taxi cab takes you so far, and there's this like middle zone that's neither country. And then you just walk for a while, like on this road in the middle of the desert with nothing else until you're in like the no man's land, neither Israel nor Jordan, small section. And then I guess you cross some line and you're in Jordan in like desert road in the middle of the desert. And it was January and in the south of Israel and Jordan, like that's a tourist area, but there were no tourists because it's cold then. So we got there and they acted like they hadn't seen anybody in a while, like the people at the cross, and they were like unpacking our bags in Jordan, and they pulled out a melodica, right? So melodica being a piano that you blow with your mouth, like a little instrument. You can hold it in your hand. Google it, millennials, melodica. They pulled it out of one of our bags. I had a guitar with me too, and it was our first cross from like, you know, two Jewish guys going into a Muslim country. And they looked at me with a very serious face and all of their same mustaches, and they looked at us and they said, "You can come into Jordan, but you have to do something first." And they paused for a long time. And they said, "You have to play us a song." We were like, "Oh God, this is great." And so we did, right? That's what we did on the way into Jordan. We played them a song. And I think that's a good theme for the time spent in Jordan and Egypt afterwards. A couple of Jewish guys surrounded by a whole lot of Muslim people. Is that our hearts were open and our minds were open, and neither of us were very attached to our Jewish identities enough to consider anybody around us an enemy, and neither was anybody else. And the absolute message everywhere we were, and we really took the time to stop and listen to people, right? Was all the same, is we're probably closer as brothers. It was a lot of men-to-men conversations as part of that culture, unfortunately. We're closer as brothers than we are enemies. And I don't know if I learned that lesson adequately before actually being in a country where that was it was on their soil to learn that.
It's an interesting lesson to learn in that moment, right? You're thousands of miles away from home. And it's just, that's a real moment, right? That's a very real moment.
Yeah. I never felt not at home, though.
Yeah, that's good.
But it was, whether Middle East or later in Asia or even later in Central America. And maybe that's just how I attach myself to home now. I left Wisconsin with a plan to move to Vermont, so I really didn't have a home. Like, I didn't live anywhere. Like, I had an address. It was probably my mom's house. But I didn't have a home, right? And I would encourage people to do that too if you ever have a chance. Because like there's all these details of travel that you could get into, but really it's like take homes. I felt like the person that left for that trip, the Nathan that left for that trip, lots of rough edges, lots of insecurity. My insecurity persists to this day, just different kind, right? Not a lot of skills in like real humanity, like understanding the human condition. Not a lot of humility. That persists to this day too, just in a different form. And most of that trip I took alone and was very alone and lonely for a lot of it too, in many different countries. But this big take of that 9-month trip is that the guy that came back from the trip, like that came back, I felt really different about how I interacted with people. and how I've mentioned a lot of times tonight already how like you keep your friends close, right? And you tell them that, and you don't. I prefer not to waste my time. And I mean that, like, I'm busy, right? Waste my time with people that don't give you that don't have that, because it's there are enough people out there that have it, right? That like can get real with you. But I came back ready to really open my heart to people and not be so defensive, and to be humble with people. And that helped with relationships. Like my relationship with women in college, similar to a lot of people in college, probably was like, I can't settle down, and a note here is that, within a few months of living in Vermont, I met my now wife and could settle down, and could open my heart and could stop and realize that sitting in front of me was probably the greatest human that I've ever met. That's my wife. In terms of like the depths of her heart and the joy she can bring to people around her. There's no one like her in the world to me. And I really think that without that trip into the abyss, into not having a home, not having a sense of home, I had to realize that it was inside of me. And that sounds really cliche. You say it out loud, like, my home was inside my heart, right? That's like,
it's a little cringy.
I know.
Hearing it out loud.
I know, right? And it's like, it's something you put up in your kitchen, like, home is where the heart is.
Yeah,
like,
it's like live, laugh, love.
It's totally that. And it's like, I don't want to play into the cliche, but it's like there was a lot learned when you realize, like, I didn't have any possessions, and whatever I carried in my bag. It was like a pen, and a passport and a toothbrush and a couple pieces of clothes. Like, nothing came with me. Camera. And boiling it down to that was huge for me, in terms of my own growth. To the point where I've had a conversation with my wife about the fact that our children don't know it. And if they're listening to this, bummer, because I just gave it away, that when your time to travel comes, we've stashed some money away that you're only going to find out about when that time comes. And I don't want you to know it's there. So hopefully you never listen to this, kids. But I think it's really important. There's funds stashed away to make sure that they have that lovely opportunity to grow as humans, if they come about it, if that's something that makes sense in their life.
That's awesome. That's so cool. But where else did you get to go on this trip? The travel is my favorite topic.
Oh, cool.
So.
Yeah. So it was by foot to Jordan, right? And then by boat, by like sea liner thingy over the Red Sea into Egypt. Really interesting part of that is 3 days after we took one of those boats, one of them capsized. Like, these are big boats too.
Wow.
And that's what we took into Egypt. There's more stories on this trip about, like, timing and death. So it was, and the plan was to fly eventually from Cairo to Bangkok. And we were either going to do that fast or slow. And I'm glad we did it slowly, because this is, you can Google this too, the tsunami that hit Southeast Asia in 2004-05, one of those two, somewhere end of 4 or early 5. The tsunami hit while we were in Egypt, and the plan was to go to Bangkok. And that tsunami took out a lot of the backpacker scene, but a lot of right where we were going. And so what's funny is we didn't even think to delay. Like, we heard about the tsunami and we're like, all right, we'll go when we want to. Like, it was just kind of like, you're going to go and experience the world however it is. So we did the Egypt thing for a bit. And I would always suggest, there's always the classic, like, pyramids and Sphinx and all that stuff. That's not where it is. It's all in the Red Sea. The Red Sea is gorgeous. You get underwater and see what the clearest water you've ever seen. But the Nile, the Nile, as it flows north to south, go further upriver on the Nile. So, like, the southern part of Egypt near Aswan Dam there, that's where all the culture I felt like sat, and a lot of like where a lot of humanity and people experiences happened. And when we really tried to get lost, like we got this one boat to take us across the Nile one day to the non-tourist side of the Nile, like away from all the ruins, and climbed this big sand dune and then went down the back side of it and ended up in this town that was all blue. Like everything was painted blue, and we never figured out why because no one spoke any English. And I don't have the Arabic skill. It's not close enough to Hebrew. Like you can kind of count and that's it. Like 5 is 5 or whatever. But the only thing they could say in English was "Give me money." Then they did. And I remember that part of it. But I always suggest get lost, right? Like get lost, get yourself lost. You can't, and you really can't. So on the topic of get lost, we'll get there. We eventually, Kirill and I were still together at this point. We split once we got to Southeast Asia, but flew from Cairo to Bangkok. And there's a big backpacker circuit there. It ends up being like Cambodia, Vietnam, Laos, Thailand. And people just do a circuit there. And it's built for it. It's ready for it. And if you have time, you can go really slow and just do a ton of great things and experience great people. And the topic of get lost, there was a point where I rented a motorcycle. And I was just like, no matter how far away you go from civilization or creature comforts or whatever, you still feel like you're home. It's like you can't get away. And I was like, how much can I challenge this? And there was a day that I just got on a motorcycle, and it was like a 150cc Yamaha bike in Laos, and just went north. Right, like there's a Chinese border there somewhere. I don't know.
You'll find it eventually.
I mean, I don't know, right? And you can't go fast to get there. And it's like no matter what, I had the feeling that I could at least make do. And I kept, when there was a fork in the road, like I would always take the road that looked rockier, or it was a dirt bike, so I could do it too. As long as someone went that direction, I would just follow them. And I tried to get lost, and I tried to get lost, and I tried to get lost, and never felt lost. And I ended up stopping. I was hungry. I was stopping in this village, which is like 3 thatch huts. Like, all you'd have to do to get found again is name a city and point, and they could point you, and you could go back. Everywhere, they get around with motorbikes, and so like you could always get gas, and you can always get food. And I'll tell you that 10-cent bowl of chicken soup was like such a it was a learning experience for me. It was like, I'm not sure I'm going to get further lost than this. And I found an amazing bowl of chicken soup, as lost as I could get in Laos. And it's another message, without like putting a sign up in your kitchen, home is where the heart is, or whatever. Like, as long as you're you and you have a toothbrush, you're probably all right. Right. It's a big lesson. And I think you need to learn it traveling, right? That like, you don't really need as much as you have. And that chicken soup, I picked up my spoon that they gave me. How do you negotiate a bowl of chicken soup? Like I always learn 10 words of the language in whatever country you're in, no matter what country it is. That includes Quebec, like, the Quebec side of Canada. Just learn some French, right? Just enough, right? But wherever you go, 10 words. And ideally, like, some novelty words. Also, if you plan to interact with people that their primary language is in English, especially in medicine, and your top 10 languages at your hospital, see if you can learn a couple words for those people, right? Right? Just, hey, I made an effort to understand at least some part of your language or your culture. I think it's important. So it's enough that I can eat kom, right? You can say kom anywhere in Southeast Asia and probably end up with some chicken. Right? I'm sorry, kom is rice. And ga, I think. 20 years. It's been 20 years. I'm doing my best. So I picked up this spoon, and it was really light. Silver-colored spoon. It wasn't plastic.
Your mind has already said subconsciously, this is a metal spoon, before you picked it up.
It's undoubtedly a metal spoon, and it was a metal spoon. It made tinking noise on the table.
Oh, interesting.
But it wasn't plastic. And it kind of had like the look to it looked like it was made by hand, but it was still super light. Like, not like the spoon that you're going to pull out of silverware around here. What are spoons made of here? I don't know.
Stainless steel sometimes?
Yeah, probably. Right. So high density metal, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm picking this one up, and I'm like, this is not a high density metal, but this is a metal, right? It's made of a light metal. And I was like, I have no idea what's going on. Right. I'm in, at this point, northeastern Laos, so on the Laos-Vietnam border. For those Lao people out there that know the country, I shouldn't pronounce the S. I know, I get it, but for other folks that see the S at the end, I'm going to pronounce it right. Lao, probably. It's probably better. So I pick it up and all right, no shared language except for my 10 words. I'm picking it up and I'm showing them that this spoon is really light. And I'm trying to ask them, why is my spoon so insanely light? What is it? Like, it's lighter than a plastic spoon almost. Like I can't figure it out. And clearly I need to know. Right? Like analysis paralysis. I need to know what's up with this spoon. Right? And so they look at me and they go, boom, boom. Boom, boom means two things in Southeast Asia. One of them means hooker, which is not what it was. But boom, boom in this case. And they're like, they say USA, boom, boom. And they're so pointing the spoon. And then it all pulled together. So there's a whole bunch of unexploded ordnance of USA mines and USA bombs and things from the Vietnam War that is in northeastern Laos. And if you're up there, you'll see there's a lot of different non-governmental organizations who are there to clear it and cover the social aspects of that, which is far beyond this conversation today. But there's a USA dropped aluminum all over that country, and those resourceful people who don't have a lot of other ways to get metal, they melted bombs to make my spoon.
That is incredible.
Right?
That is like insane and not like a bad way, like a good way.
Like your
That
tax
is
dollars at
wild.
work. Yeah. Right. Your tax dollars at work. That spoon was your parents' tax dollars at some point, right? That the world comes full circle because any person you ever meet or experience is gonna come back to you.
Yeah.
Any experience, it's all gonna come full circle. You have to believe because it's gonna be true. And I have like life examples. I think we've talked about them before.
I think we have
Of like
separately.
Yeah, of like
from
people coming back to you that you never thought would have come back.
Yes, we have.
Yeah. It's like this aluminum spoon, right? But it wasn't lost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that bowl of chicken soup was the I don't know, the get lost moment, I guess, for you.
It was as far as I could get, but it never felt lost. Like I
Yeah.
wanted to be the guy who recovered from his own lostdom, right? Or like I was lost and I got found, but never got lost. Like it was like seeking adventure. Like, oh, I'm really lost because that's going to be a good story to tell later, but it never happened, right? You're certainly seeking adventure if you're traveling the world, and that sense of lostness was like 3 months into a trip in Southeast Asia. I don't think it's attainable. Or it didn't feel attainable, and I think folks that have done long trips in areas like that would say the same. Like, you stick me anywhere, compass, and there's some people around, and I'm fine. I don't feel lost at all.
So where else did you get into? You mentioned Central America.
Yeah, Costa Rica and Nicaragua, and then back to Costa Rica, and then back to Nicaragua.
So you've been all over the place.
On that, on that trip, and then Canada. I had to find an apartment in Burlington for medical school, and so I had to come back to the States for a minute and stop by Canada. There's somebody I met when I was traveling, and I stopped by and saw her for a bit on my way to Burlington, and then came back and flew back to Central America. I was like, I'm not ready to go back yet. I don't need flushing toilets. Not yet. It's not time yet. It's my last chance. I mean, because once you step foot in medical school, that opportunity's gone basically.
Yeah.
Like you can take a 1 month trip if you really plan it, but to get totally lost and not have attachments and not have somebody needing you and all those things, like it's the second you step foot in medical school and get your first loan bill, like you're next thing you know it, you've got a family and you can't just do that anymore.
Right. So asking you something on the spot here and conscious of time and everything.
Yeah.
We're at like 2 hours.
No way.
Absolutely. Yes way.
Oh.
Do you want to pause and we'll pick it up in another episode down the road?
Is that a known thing with this podcast?
I've already had another one I had to split that was 3 hours long.
Whoa.
Yeah. And there's another one at the time of this recording. It hasn't been released yet. They're coming back for like episode 2 and 3 already planned out.
Okay. Well, I mean, it's a good spot to pause and ponder lostness and humanity.
Yeah, I think so too. That's why I kind of wanted to bring it right here.
Yeah.
So let's plan another episode.
I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I'm really busy, so it's gonna take.
So I'll pencil you in. It's December right now, just before Christmas. How about like Memorial Day?
Yeah, right. Like, I want you to know, Cameron, that you're only so worth my time. So out there in podcast world, that will be a test of me actually living up to what I'm trying to live up to. Is how quickly you see this second episode come out.
Yeah.
Is whether I can make you a priority.
And we're coming up on holidays, so it's hard to change priorities with, the tradition.
I like the challenge.
Okay.
Yeah.
My calendar's fairly open, so
we can leave although it's your job to finish your show, but I feel like I have to leave a note. Is that okay for me to leave a note too?
So I ask people every episode, so you're gonna have more than one episode, so you can do this again.
Yeah.
There's one piece of advice that you want to leave with whoever's listening, or your kids, grandkids.
Mm-hmm.
What's that one piece of advice?
It's good. So you actually get me to leave this thing dangling here.
Yes.
Right. So what's the one piece of advice is that you need to go watch the movie Stop Making Sense. Right.
Stop Making Sense.
It's a music movie.
When was that made?
Talking Heads, 80s.
80s, okay.
Yeah.
An 80s movie.
Talking Heads, Stop Making Sense. And just watch it without question. And there's two parts of the advice, and one of them is you just got to watch it for the musical experience, but also watch the side parts. There's a bunch of extra little things. And David Byrne from Talking Heads, like one of the most brilliant people I've ever come in contact with in terms of media. Had this one thing, and every time he was asked a question, he interviewed himself. He said, "I'll tell you later." So he has all of his answers, and so that's a good way for me to leave this first part of the podcast. Is if you ask me any more questions, my answer is going to be, "I'll tell you later."
I love it. Awesome. Thank you so much for hanging out and making this a priority. Finally. I'm gonna mess with you about it.
That's great.
Yeah, thank you so much for hanging out. I really appreciate it. I am very excited to sit down again and talk about more things that we're kind of glazed over in this episode, and we can really dig into medical school and life afterwards.
Looking forward to it. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Well, thank you. I'll see you next time. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Fatal to Prejudice. If you or anyone you know would like to be a guest, please visit my website at CameronChats.com and fill out the Contact Me form. Please fill out the subject line as podcast interview and write me a small blurb on why you or someone you know should be a guest. I'll leave a link in the description for ease of access. You can support this podcast by listening to it on your favorite podcasting site. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Another way to support is by becoming a Patreon at patreon.com/Fatal to Prejudice. Patreon is the only monetary support system. If you would like to sign up and support through there, I am forever grateful for you. Again, thank you for tuning in.